You are looking at one of the greatest mysteries in Mafia history. This is the unsolved disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, the famous labor union leader just vanished without a trace back in 1975, and even after all this time, nobody knows what happened to him. Well, almost nobody, because if there's one group of people who might know what really happened to Jimmy, it's the mob. But they're not talking. But while the mob might keep secrets close to their chest, there are other ways to find out what they're up to. After all, we live in a technological age. And while the mob might be able to keep an eye on people the old-fashioned way, they also have to worry about the modern age. So today, let us take a look at some of the coolest surveillance tricks that the Mafia uses to keep tabs on their own members and their enemies. And stick around until the end of this video, because we'll be taking a look at the very latest in Mafia technology. First, let's start with the simplest method: GPS tracking. In order to make sure that your targets aren't planning anything untoward, it's important to keep track of them. And while the mob might not always be able to physically follow their targets, GPS tracking can do the job for them. All they need to do is plant a GPS tracker on the target's car or person, and then they can keep track of them at all times. So that way they know where the target is, and they can plan accordingly. Of course, it helps if the target doesn't know that they're being followed. But if they do, well, then the mob has other options. In the past, the mob used to rely on things like phone tapping and bugging the target's house. But these days, it's much easier to simply hire someone to follow the target. Of course, this isn't the easiest option, but it is one of the most effective. By hiring a private investigator, the mob can get up close and personal with the target and find out everything they need to know. And what about if the mob needs to watch their targets without actually following them? Well, there are plenty of options available. The mob can set up cameras around the target's house or office to keep an eye on them. They can hire someone to simply sit in a car across the street and keep watch. Of course, this isn't the most high-tech option, but it is effective. It gives the mob the opportunity to see what the target is doing and who they're meeting with without actually following them. And if something seems suspicious, the mob can always follow the target home and see what they're up to there. What if the mob needs to keep an eye on their targets for longer than usual? Well, there are a few options available. The mob can rent a room in a hotel near the target's house or office and set up a camera with a long lens to get a clear view of the target's property. Or they can simply hire someone to sit in a car nearby and wait. Of course, this option is only available if the mob has enough patience. But it can be effective if the target is planning something big. So what if the mob needs to spy on their targets, but they need to do it from afar? Well, there are still a few options available. The mob can hire a private investigator to follow the target and take photos or videos of them. Or they can use the internet to their advantage. The mob can set up a social media account in the target's name and then start following them online. They can also use hacking techniques to get access to the target's emails and other online accounts. Of course, these options require a lot more manpower, but they can be effective if the target is careful. Now, while all these methods are relatively low-tech, the mob is constantly evolving, and they're always looking for new and better ways to spy on their targets. One of the latest methods involves using drones. Drones are a relatively new technology, but the mob has been quick to adopt them. Mobsters are now using drones to fly over their targets' houses and offices and even to follow them around. Of course, this method is only available to the most high-tech mobsters, but it's quickly becoming more popular. After all, why bother following your targets the old-fashioned way when you can do it from the air? While GPS tracking, phone tapping, and the like might be useful, sometimes you need a more direct line of sight, and that's where hidden cameras come in. Hidden cameras are everywhere these days, and they're relatively cheap to buy. Once you have the camera, it's easy to send the footage directly to the mobster who needs it. That way they can keep an eye on their target without ever setting foot in the target's house or office. Of course, it helps if the mobster knows where to look. There's nothing worse than finding a hidden camera and not knowing what it's there for. But if the mobster knows what they're looking for, then they might be able to find exactly what they need. But what if the mobster needs to see their target, but they don't want to risk getting caught? That's where surveillance cameras come in. Surveillance cameras are everywhere these days, and they are usually monitored by someone who doesn't care what's going on. That means that a mobster can easily monitor their target without drawing attention to themselves. All they need to do is find a camera that has a clear view of the target, and then they can watch as much as they want. Of course, it helps if the mobster knows how to operate the camera. But with so many surveillance cameras out there, it's not too hard to find one that works. Finally, we have the most high-tech option of all, cyber spying. With the rise of the internet, cyber spying has become one of the most popular ways to spy on targets. All a mobster needs to do is hack into the target's computer or phone, and they can see everything that the target sees. They can also use hacking techniques to get access to the target's personal information, such as their bank account details and credit card numbers. Of course, this option requires a lot of skill, but it's definitely worth it if you can pull it off. After all, why bother following your targets the old-fashioned way when you can spy on them from the comfort of your own home? So those are some of the most popular Mafia surveillance tricks. As you can see, the Mafia is constantly evolving, and they're always looking for new and better ways to spy on their targets. What do you think is the coolest Mafia surveillance trick? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about the Mafia, check out our other videos. Thanks for watching.